You are sitting across from a friend whose smile doesn't reach their eyes. You feel a strange chill, but you keep talking about the weather anyway. We see others ignore red flags in their partners and wonder how they are blind. Then you remember the time you felt a knot in your stomach at work. You ignored it and stayed for 3 years until the bridge finally burned down. That internal alarm was screaming, but you chose to believe the polite lie instead. This is the silent instinct of denial, working to keep your world from collapsing. We often mistake intuition for a supernatural gift or a mystical whisper from the universe. In reality, it is a high-speed biological calculation based on thousands of subtle data points. Your brain notices the split-second micro-expression or the slight change in a familiar voice. It processes these clues long before your conscious mind can form a single coherent sentence. When we say something feels off, we are acknowledging a mismatch between reality and a projection. Our survival instinct has detected a predator or a social threat hiding behind a smile. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them. They watch a sibling stay in a toxic friendship despite every warning sign being visible to the outside world. We call it naivety or foolishness when we observe it from the safety of a distance. We assume that if we were in their position, we would act on the truth immediately. However, the act of ignoring a gut feeling is not a failure of intelligence or observation. It is a sophisticated survival mechanism designed to maintain the stability of your current environment. The mind views the truth as a potential grenade that could destroy your social standing or safety. If you acknowledge the off feeling, you are forced to take an uncomfortable action. Evolutionary psychology suggests that our ancestors survived by maintaining cohesion within the tribe at almost any cost. Being wrong about a threat was often safer than being socially disruptive. If you accuse a high-status member of the group of being untrustworthy, you risk immediate exile. Our brains still prioritize the safety of the group over the accuracy of our intuition. This behavior is adaptive because it prevents us from living in a state of constant, high-alert paranoia. We choose to believe the lie because the lie allows us to keep functioning normally. Reframing this as a survival instinct changes how we view our own moments of hesitation and doubt. You are not being weak. You are trying to protect the structure of your life. We treat our intuition as a nuisance because it threatens the comfortable narrative we have carefully built. It is an uninvited guest that points out the cracks in our expensive foundation. By ignoring the signal, we buy ourselves more time in a situation that is slowly failing. We trade long-term safety for the immediate relief of not having to face a conflict. This creates a psychological trap where we become complicit in our own deception to avoid a crisis. We tell ourselves we are just being reasonable or giving someone the benefit of the doubt. In truth, we are managing a deep internal conflict between what we see and what we need. The need for stability almost always wins the battle against the perception of a threat. Consider the employee who notices the company's finances are being handled in a very shady way. They feel the tension in every meeting, yet they continue to show up and work. They are not blind to the danger. They are simply unable to afford the cost of the truth. Their brain suppresses the intuition to ensure they can continue to pay their monthly mortgage. This suppression is so effective that we often forget the alarm was ever triggered in first place. We gaslight ourselves until the off feeling becomes a dull background hum we barely notice. This is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore in our quietest, most private moments of reflection. We realize that our lives are built on a series of ignored red flags. Every major regret often begins with a quiet internal signal that was politely asked to be silent. We chose the path of least resistance, which is often the path of most denial. The mind does not want to be right. It wants to be safe and socially accepted. It will sacrifice your internal clarity to ensure you remain a member of the collective. Awareness starts when we recognize that our gut is not broken, but our courage is being managed. We are living in a state of calculated blindness to keep our world turning. Staying with this uncomfortable truth is the first step in seeing the invisible patterns of your life. It is the beginning of understanding why you stay when you know you should go. Choosing awareness over avoidance requires us to look at the moments we decided to stop trusting ourselves. We must examine the cost of the peace we have fought so hard to keep. There is a profound difference between being safe and being certain about the reality you inhabit today. Most of us have chosen a version of safety that requires us to be deaf. What looks like a calm life is often just a very successful suppression of 1,000 warnings. We are walking on thin ice and pretending that the cracking sound is just music. The habit of silencing our own intuition begins long before we face the complex choices of adulthood. It is rooted in the early social training we receive within the family unit as children. A child's survival depends entirely on the emotional and physical availability of their primary caregivers at all times. They are biologically programmed to maintain this connection, even if the environment feels unstable or threatening. If a parent is angry but claims they are fine, the child experiences a sharp cognitive dissonance. Their body senses the atmospheric tension, while their ears hear a completely different, peaceful narrative. To survive this conflict, the child must learn to doubt their own physical perception of reality. They prioritize the parent's verbal lie because challenging the truth would risk a total relational collapse. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them during a difficult family gathering. They see a relative smiling through gritted teeth, while everyone else pretends the air isn't heavy. This is where the mind learns that social harmony is more valuable than individual psychological accuracy or truth. We are taught that being polite is synonymous with ignoring the obvious elephant in the room. Behavioral psychology suggests that we are conditioned through thousands of micro-interactions to prioritize external scripts over internal cues. We are praised for being easy and criticized for being too sensitive or dramatic. By the time we reach adolescence, the internal alarm system has been muffled by years of social reinforcement. We have learned that noticing something is off usually leads to isolation or social punishment. Evolutionary pressure further solidified this trait by favoring individuals who could tolerate high levels of group friction. Those who could ignore the flaws of the tribe were more likely to stay and survive. Our ancestors, who were too quick to point out the hidden motives of leaders, often faced swift exile. The brain evolved to value the protection of the herd over the integrity of the individual's gut. The mind learned that ignoring a threat is a viable strategy if the threat is currently manageable. It uses a psychological buffer to keep our fear at a distance so we can focus. Consider the young adult who notices their new group of friends is subtly cruel to others. They feel a pit in their stomach every time the group laughs at someone's expense. Yet, the fear of being the next target forces them to suppress that physical feeling of disgust. They laugh along, teaching their brain that survival requires the betrayal of their own internal moral compass. This origin story is not one of malice, but one of a very high-stakes necessity for belonging. We learn to ignore our instincts because our instincts were once a threat to our social life. The brain views the off feeling as a biological glitch that interferes with the goal of cooperation. It attempts to smooth over the rough edges of reality to keep the gears turning. As we grow, this pattern of self-gaslighting becomes a highly efficient and unconscious background process for the mind. We don't even realize we are ignoring our gut until the consequences finally arrive. We have been trained to look for logical evidence while ignoring the physical evidence of our own nervous system. We believe that if we cannot prove a feeling, the feeling is not real. This reliance on external proof is a learned defense mechanism that protects us from taking terrifying, lonely actions. It allows us to stay in the familiar, even if the familiar is slowly becoming toxic. We are products of a lineage that survived by being adaptable, which often meant being quietly and strategically blind. Our biology is the result of 1,000 years of successful, calculated social silence. This is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore as we reflect on our most formative relationships. We see that we were never taught how to trust the vibration of our own skin. We were taught to trust the map, even when the map didn't match the ground we were standing on. We chose the comfort of the drawing over the danger of the actual terrain. The mind remains a dedicated servant to the original script of staying safe within the social fold. It would rather you be wrong and included than right and standing completely alone in the dark. Awareness of this origin doesn't make the intuition louder. It simply explains why we are so good at hiding. We are following a blueprint that was drafted for us by people who are also afraid. Staying with this uncomfortable truth means admitting that your rationality is often just a mask for your oldest fears. You are not being logical, you are being a very well-trained social animal. Choosing awareness over avoidance means acknowledging that your childhood survival strategies are now your adult limitations. You are still trying to please a ghost that left the room a long time ago. What looks like a calm and reasoned decision is often just the echo of an old, unspoken command. We are still being good by pretending that we don't see what we clearly see. In our daily interactions, the act of ignoring a gut feeling is the invisible glue that holds social structures together. We participate in a collective performance where everyone agrees to overlook the obvious cracks in the stage. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, such as a friend dating a pathological liar. You see the inconsistencies in the stories, and you know your friend sees them too. Yet they remain. The social expression of denial is often framed as loyalty, patience, or being a supportive and non-judgmental partner. We give beautiful names to the moments where we choose to let a red flag fly by. In a professional setting, this plays out as the missing stare dynamic where everyone knows a certain person is volatile. We don't fix the person, we simply learn to step over the problem to avoid a fall. The workplace rewards those who can navigate these hidden dangers without causing a scene or filing a formal complaint. Those who point out the off energy are often labeled as difficult or not being a team player. We see this in romantic relationships where one person begins to pull away or hide their phone more frequently. The partner feels the shift in the air, a sudden coldness that wasn't there the night before. Instead of addressing the shift, the partner often becomes more agreeable and attentive to compensate for the growing distance. They try to fix the energy by pretending it isn't actually happening to them right now. This behavior is a form of social bartering where we trade our internal truth for the external appearance of a stable bond. We believe that if we don't name the problem might eventually thus disappear. Psychologist Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves and our society that we refuse to acknowledge. In social settings, we often meet each other shadow to shadow, sensing the darkness while talking about the light. This creates a pervasive sense of inauthenticity that we all feel, but few are willing to call out loud. We are all sensing the off notes in the symphony while continuing to clap for the performance. Consider a family dinner where a parent's drinking has become a visible burden to everyone sitting at the table. The glasses clink, the jokes are made, and the tension is high enough to be a physical weight. Yet, everyone maintains the script of a happy family because the alternative is a confrontation that no one is ready for. The intuition of every person in the room is screaming, but the social contract is stronger. This is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore in your own history of friendships and long-term professional associations. You realize how much of your social life is built on a foundation of strategic, polite silence. We use small talk as a shield to prevent anyone from getting close enough to see that we are uneasy. We keep the conversation on the surface to ensure the off feeling doesn't have a chance to rise. The social reward for this behavior, a life that looks seamless and successful to the casual, outside observer. You have the friends, the job, and the status because you never made anyone feel truly uncomfortable. However, the psychological cost is a deep, underlying sense of loneliness that cannot be cured by more social contact. You are surrounded by people, but no one is actually interacting with the person who sees the truth. We are all participating in a silent agreement to keep the world feeling safe, even when it is clearly not. We treat our intuition as a social utility that must be managed and hidden away at all costs. When someone finally breaks the silence and speaks the truth, the group often reacts with anger toward the speaker. The person who points out the off feeling is seen as the one who created the problem. This reaction reinforces our instinct to stay quiet and ignore the warnings our own bodies are giving us daily. We learn that it is safer to be part of a sinking ship than to be the first to jump. The mind justifies this as being a stable and reliable member of the community who doesn't cause unnecessary waves. We pride ourselves on our ability to handle difficult people without ever breaking our own composure. What looks like high social intelligence is often just a very refined ability to ignore the signals of danger. We are masters of a social game that requires us to be fundamentally dishonest with ourselves and others. Staying with this uncomfortable truth reveals the superficial nature of many of our most important and long-standing human connections. We see that we are often more committed to the image than to the actual person. Choosing awareness over avoidance means looking at the moments you chose to stay silent when your body told you to speak. It means asking what you are actually protecting when you choose to play along with the lie. What looks like a peaceful social circle is often just a very quiet room full of people who are afraid. We are all waiting for someone else to be the first to admit that something is very wrong. Modern life has created a digital echo chamber that makes it almost impossible to trust the physical signals of the gut. We live in a world of high-definition filters and carefully curated personas that are designed to deceive our ancient instincts. In the past, you could see a person's posture or hear the tremor in their voice during a difficult conversation. Now, we communicate through text and images where the off feeling is easily scrubbed away by a clever caption. The technology we use every day is built to keep us in a state of constant, shallow engagement. We are so busy processing the next notification that we don't have time to sit with the discomfort of a subtle realization. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a friend who seems perfect on social media. You know their life is falling apart, yet you find yourself believing their highlight reel over your own memory. This creates a digital gaslighting effect where the proof on the screen contradicts the vibe in the room. We begin to trust the pixels more than our own biological sensors because the pixels are more consistent and loud. Society rewards this behavior by celebrating those who can maintain a flawless personal brand regardless of their internal reality. We have turned the act of ignoring the truth into a professional skill called reputation management. The modern workplace amplifies this by demanding a level of toxic positivity that acts as a silencer for the intuition. You are encouraged to lean in and stay hungry, even when you sense the company culture is predatory. We are told that if we feel uneasy, it is likely just our own imposter syndrome or a lack of personal resilience. The culture reframes your survival instinct as a mental health issue that you need to fix with more productivity. This is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore in the way we consume information and news. We feel a deep, existential dread about the state of the world, yet we keep scrolling as if everything is fine. We have become experts at doom scrolling, a behavior that allows us to witness a crisis without actually feeling the impact of it. Our brains have learned to categorize global catastrophe as just another form of digital entertainment. The speed of modern life acts as a physical barrier to the processing of intuition, which requires slow, quiet time. We are moving too fast to hear the whisper of the self that says something is fundamentally wrong here. Consider the hustle culture that rewards people for working until they burn out and lose their health. The body sends 1,000 signals of exhaustion, but the cultural script says that rest is for the weak and the uninspired. We ignore the heart palpitations and the insomnia because we want the status that comes with being a high achiever. We have turned our bodies into machines that we treat with a total, clinical lack of empathy or care. Modern dating apps have further industrialized the act of ignoring off feelings by turning people into a deck of cards. We swipe past potential threats and ignore red flags because the next option is only a few seconds away. The abundance of choice makes us believe that no single off feeling matters because we can always start over. Yet, we find ourselves repeating the same patterns because we never stop to ask why the alarm was ringing. We are living in an experiment of hyperconnectivity that has actually left us more disconnected from our own biological truth. We have replaced our internal compass with a set of external algorithms that tell us what to value. Society quietly rewards the person who can stay cool and objective in the face of obvious human suffering. We view emotional detachment as a sign of intellectual superiority in a world that is drowning in raw data. This cultural pressure forces us to intellectualize our gut feelings until they lose all their original power and urgency. We turn a bad feeling into a data point that we can analyze and eventually ignore with a spreadsheet. We have built a civilization that is incredibly smart, but increasingly unwise about the basic requirements of human safety. We are like pilots who have turned off the cockpit alarms because the noise was distracting us from the view. Staying with this uncomfortable truth means admitting that your digital life is a sophisticated way to avoid your actual life. You are using the noise of the world to drown out the signal of your own nervous system. Choosing awareness over avoidance means recognizing that the off feeling is the only thing that is actually real. Everything else is just a commercial, a post, or a performance designed to sell you a sense of security. What looks like modern progress is often just a very efficient way to stay in a state of perpetual denial. We are building a future that has no room for the messy, honest, and inconvenient truth of the gut. The psychological cost of this amplification is a growing sense of depersonalization, where you feel like a stranger in your own skin. You are functioning perfectly, but you are no longer there to experience the reality of it. The realization that you have spent your life silencing your own internal compass does not lead to a sudden, empowering breakthrough. It leads to a heavy, quiet understanding of how much of your reality is built on a series of convenient lies. You begin to see that the off feeling was never meant to be a solution or a guide to a better life. It was simply a mirror reflecting the truth of a situation that you are not yet prepared to handle. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them before they are forced to look at their own reflections. They see the tragic architecture of a life lived in fear of the very instincts meant to protect it. You are left standing in the wreckage of your own certainty, realizing that the alarms were right all along. The knot in your stomach at that wedding, the chill during that interview, and the silence in that hallway were all honest. But knowing this now does not change the fact that you stayed, you signed the contract, and you gave away your years. Awareness provides a clear view of the past without offering a way to edit the consequences of your silence. The tension remains because you are still the same person, living in the same world that demands your continued compliance. You now hear the alarm clearly, but the exit remains blocked by the heavy furniture of your existing responsibilities. You realize that your social grace was often just a refined form of cowardice that you dressed up as maturity. You were not being a good person, you were being a person who was too afraid to be seen as difficult. The mind tries to bargain at this stage, looking for a way to trust the gut without losing the comfort of the herd. It wants the clarity of the truth without the isolation that truth almost always brings to a person's life. This is the point where the weight of awareness becomes almost unbearable for the modern individual. You see the off energy in your partner, your boss, and your friends, and you realize you have no simple way to fix any of it. If you speak the truth, you destroy the peace. If you stay silent, you destroy the self. You are trapped in a psychological stalemate where every move feels like a betrayal of either your safety or your integrity. There is no advice that can bridge the gap between your biological instinct and your social survival. You must live in the friction of knowing that your world is off while continuing to act as if everything is perfectly fine. Most people eventually decide that the cost of being awake is a burden they would rather put back down. They return to the polite fiction, hoping the off feeling will eventually numb itself through repetition and time. You are left with the knowledge that you are a stranger to yourself, living a life that was negotiated in a state of fear. You see the patterns now, but the patterns are the very things that are currently keeping you housed and fed. This awareness creates a permanent fracture in your perception of human connection and social authority. You can never again look at a perfect situation without searching for the hidden crack that your body already knows is there. The modern world will continue to offer you distractions and labels to help you ignore the persistent hum of your intuition. It will invite you to call your dread stress and your suspicion anxiety to make them easier to dismiss. Only you will know that the stress is actually the sound of your soul trying to claw its way out of a trap. Only you will know that the anxiety is just the truth trying to be heard over the noise of your life. Choosing awareness over avoidance is not an act of healing, but an act of honest observation. It is a space where the unspoken patterns of survival are seen for what they are, a cage we built ourselves. The survival instinct has done its job too well, creating a world so safe that there is no longer any room for the person. We have survived at the expense of our ability to actually be present in the lives we have created. You are now a witness to the silent struggle between your ancient biology and your modern social script. This tension is the defining characteristic of the hidden self, and there is no simple way to resolve the conflict. The question of what happens when you finally stop ignoring the signal remains hanging in the cold, still air. We are masters of survival who have forgotten that the goal of surviving was to eventually begin living. The act of ignoring the off feeling is the first step in a much larger process of self-alienation that we all participate in. It is the beginning of a long journey toward a version of ourselves that we no longer recognize in the dark. When we choose to doubt our own skin, we open the door for every other form of psychological manipulation and control. This fundamental betrayal of the self is linked to how we perceive power and authority in every other area of life. Have you ever wondered why you feel a sudden, intense anger toward people who are brave enough to point out the truth you are trying to hide? Joining a space where these unspoken patterns are examined honestly is a choice to see the architecture of your own silence. Choosing awareness over avoidance is the only way to recognize the survival instincts that are currently running your life.